The next portion of the demonstration, we're going to build the console cover for this particular unit. In order to do that, we're going to go to a configuration called Build Outer Shell. And we're going to use some of our surfacing techniques to actually build this particular design. Here you can see it turns on several of the model, several parts from the actual assembly. And then what we want to do is just simply go over and identify the console housing, and we'll simply in-place edit into that housing. Now when we do that, you're going to notice that we've got some industrial design sketches. If I turn off the background components, you can kind of see them from a top view, a front view, and a right view. So he's got somewhat of an idea of what he wants this to look like, and so what we can do is go ahead and begin our design by just simply creating the base feature. In order to do that, we'll just simply use a parallel reference plane and pull it down to this line to the front of the part here. It kicks us into the sketching environment where we will begin sketching. And what you want to do is get right on the reference plane and just come out to the end and just kind of start sketching what this part's going to look like. So you go to the endpoint, so you make sure you have a closed sketch. And then what we can do is go ahead and lock in to midpoint, and then start attaching some dimensions, and we'll get that. We also want to add an angular dimension, and we can do that. And then we want another angular on the opposite side. Of course, there's a couple ways to achieve this in the sketch environment. And then of course we want to add a dimension to the side, and we'll go ahead and make that 3 inches. Once we have our sketch kind of roughed in, then it takes us back to the top level, and we're going to go ahead and pull this up about, let's say, 9 inches. Now that we've created that, what we want to do is come to a side view, and you'll notice that we also need to remove material from the side. For that, we'll use the cutout command. And again, these are just some general commands to get our shape kind of roughed in. Make sure you don't pick up midpoint here. Just kind of get point on and just sketch your lines. And what we want to do is remove material from the top half, and we'll just use the through all option and put the arrow in both directions to quickly remove that information. The next thing that we want to do is actually add a couple of rounds. So for this top round, we want this to be 0.4. And then for these bottom two, at least from the sketch, it shows a 0.25. So we'll go ahead and create those. And then we need to create 2 on the side, and those also need to be 1/4 inch or 0.25. So this gets us very close to the general shape, and now as we take a look at the top view, we have somewhat looks like a bullet nose that we need to create here. In order to create that, we're going to use some curves and then blue surf to develop a surface there. So the first thing we'll do is use the sketch command to identify the top reference plane, and it takes us in again into the sketch environment where we will begin sketching with the curve command. What you want to do is you want to first start to go to the outside to the outside. So we'll get the endpoint, make sure you get endpoint, and then you want to click a couple of times to place a couple of points, and then go down and get the midpoint, and then you want 2 points on this side, and then go up and pick the endpoint. The next thing that you'll want to do is use the tangent option to make sure that these lines are tangent and nice and smooth. Then what we're going to do is we're going to pick up not the control vertice, but the control point on the line, and draw a line between those 2 control points for the 2 lines. Then what we want to do is go ahead and use horizontal vertical, and then point on to get midpoint to the center on both lines very quickly. And you can see that develops a nice curve, and it should be tangent. We also want to convert these lines from lines to construction, and then we can easily place a dimension just to show you that it is indeed tangent. So for example, if I take and scroll this, you're going to see that it is concentric on both sides. Okay, so that looks good. So what we can do is go back and go ahead and begin developing the next shape. For this, we want to use parallel off of the top reference plane, and we want to come and pick up the bottom arc. So if I zoom up a little bit, you can see it better, and I'll pick up that end point of that arc. And basically we want to repeat the steps that we just did by picking up the end point, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then another end point. Then what we want to do is get these tangent, and then we want to develop from the control points 2 lines as we did before, and then we want to make them horizontal vertical to make sure this is concentric on both sides, to each side, and then we want to convert those. And just to show that they are concentric, if we move them, you can see, oh, well, one thing we forgot to do is do the point on to center, and then they will be. So now when I grab that end point, you'll see they both move as it should. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now we can go and create or develop the third curve, and for this I'm going to just identify this top face, and for this particular curve I'm going to use the tangent arc command. Make sure you get the end point, and again get the end point. Then what we can do is simply select the curve and convert it. We also, if we want, we can make sure that this is in midpoint. You can see that when I select the curve that it is indeed in the center. And so now we've developed our 3 guide curves. The next thing that we're going to create is the curve down the center that kind of gives us this particular shape here. In order to do that, we're going to create another sketch off of the right reference plane. And then I'm going to rotate it a little bit and use the curve command again. This way we can pick up the silhouette points. Want to make sure you get the silhouette point. And then once we get the silhouette point, we also want to make sure it's tangent to these faces. So what I'm going to do is just basically identify the control vertice and make sure that they're they're square to the front and the top face. Then we can close and return back to the top view. Now what I'm going to do is simply turn off these sketches so that you get a better idea of what we're creating here. Then we can go and use a command called derived curve, where I can pick the bottom curve and accept it. And then I also want to do a chain on this top one. So this whole front face, we're going to derive the edges from that face. That way we can use it in the blue surf command. I'm going to switch to single and simply select those 2 curves and then pick the bottom here. And then I'm going to come over and select these 2 curves, and then you can see that's going to quickly develop the first shape that we have. Then what I'm going to do is go to the guide curve step, where I'm going to start selecting first the bottom curve and accepting it, and you'll see the shape update or the surface update to those curves as I identify them. And there you have the shape that we're looking for. The next thing that we need to do is the bounded surface command to identify both curves on the top to close this surface out. and then we're going to do the same on the bottom. Once we've finished that, we want to go ahead and Boolean this, but before we do that, we actually need to stitch it by just fencing it in and accepting it. Then we can use the Boolean operation and make sure you select the Unite, and it's going to go ahead and add that information in. Then we can hide our sketches and also our curves. So you can see how easy it was to develop that using Blue Surf, and all we had to do is basically set up our curves. The final thing that we need to do is come back over to the one of the hand sketches here, and you're going to notice that the back side has a little bit of a curve to it. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and create another sketch, our final sketch of the day for this particular part anyway. Go to the top view, use arc by 3, and basically get an arc that's just a little bit above the edge here. And then what I want to do is go ahead, and it does show that it is a 7-inch arc, so make it 7, and maybe move it down a little bit. Okay, and we can also, if we desire, we can set up the its midpoint to the midpoint of the wrong command. Horizontal vertical to the midpoint, and then close out. Now once we've developed that, then we can use the extrude command from Sketch and just simply pull that face up. And then what I'm going to use is the replace face to select this back face and change it to the surfaced face. So again, a nice command that allows you to replace the surface. So at that point I can go back and remove or turn off the sketch. And then the final thing that we want to do is to go ahead and add a round on the back side, which is going to be, again, 1/4 inch. And then once that's done, we're ready to shell out the material so that those components can fit inside. And again, we're looking for a 1/8 inch thin wall. And then we switch to single operation because I also want this back face to be thin walled out, and very quickly we can develop the shape that we're looking for. And if I turn back on the design, you can kind of see how those components fit within this particular model. When I close and return back into the assembly, we turn that model on, and again gives you a better idea of what we have. Now we still have some holes that we could create very quickly off those faces by including edges from those parts, but this gives you a general idea of how powerful our surfacing capabilities are in Solid Edge with synchronous technology.